The Big 12 did not conduct a preseason media poll this year, but Locked On's got you covered.
You are Locked On College Crossover, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Your team every day.
Welcome on into Locked On UCF and Locked On Kansas State. This is a Locked On crossover. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of every single day. I'm your host, Mike G. Joining me as he does from time to time is my good friend, Christian, from across the way at Kansas State. Again, this is a Locked On crossover. We're talking Big 12 preseason poll. Christian, on today's show, we're going to talk about our preseason poll, talk about where our coaches rank in the Big 12, and then we're going to make some season predictions. I'm interested to get your predictions here on Kansas State, but let's start with the poll. The Big 12 picked Arizona State to finish last year. They finished first. They picked Utah to finish first. They finished last. They just said, screw it. Let's get rid of it. We're so bad at this. But we need to project. We need it. We, the fans, need it. So we're going to do that now. Let's get into this. I'm going to pull up this poll, and we'll talk about where our teams rank, and then we'll sound it out for our friends on audio. The Locked On preseason Big 12 poll has at 16 the Arizona Wildcats, where I think they belong, at the bottom. Definitely at the bottom. The UCF Knights at 15. And then you've got the Cincinnati Bearcats coming in at 14. At 13, West Virginia, 12, Oklahoma, 11, Houston, 10, Colorado, 9, Kansas, Utah comes in at 8. The Horned Frogs, TCU, they come in at 7. At 6, we have the BYU Cougars. Iowa State comes in at 5. Baylor at 4. Texas Tech, who spent a ton of money in the portal this offseason, comes in at 3. Kansas State at 2. And the reigning Big 12 champs come in again at number 1 here. Let's jump right into this. I want to start at number 1. Do the Sun Devils?
Yeah.
Do they belong up there? I know before we started recording, you mentioned, hey, they got a lot returning here. One of those, Scatterboo. So with Scatterboo not returning, is this a deserving spot for Kansas State?
Well, for Arizona State, yeah, I still voted for them to be number 1. Yeah, no worries. I voted for Arizona State to win. And when we were picking about this poll here, they were the reason that I picked them, and they do have a lot returning. And let's go ahead and take a step back too. Like, they were one play away from beating Texas in arguably the most exciting game in the college ball playoffs as well. So there's a reason why I had to pick them number 1 in this poll. I think that they deserve to be there. One, maybe a little bit of just like remorse from last year because of them being predicted to finish last and then starting at the very top. Maybe there's a little bit of like, reimbursement, if you will. Like, we're starting to feel bad for you. But no, either way, I really do like what they return. Sam Leavitt's a great quarterback. Jordan Tyson's not injured. Something that they had to handle in the playoffs. He's going to be returning, hopefully 100% as well. And although they did lose Cam Scatterboo, they brought over a great transfer in, I think his last name's Udo, the running back that played for Army. So I think he's going to not be a Scatterboo, don't get me wrong. I think that's type of a generational player, at least at the college level. But I think they're going to be just fine when it comes to replacing his type of talent. And Dillingham's a very good coach.
Sticking here with Arizona State, so much of college football is driven by quarterback play. Without dynamic quarterback play in today's college football, it's really hard to find consistent success. Sam Leavitt obviously returns for Arizona State. He finished 8th in the Big 12 in passing yards at 2,885 passing yards. That was 24 touchdowns, 6 interceptions, average completion of 8. I think if they're going to repeat, he's going to have to be a little better. He's going to have to be on the north side of 3,000 yards passing, certainly. The Big 12 produced 5 3,000-yard passers last year. Noah Pivetta of Arizona came up just short, like yards short. So we want to throw him in there. They've got 6 3,000-yard passers. Shedeur Sanders was the 4,000-yard passer in that group. But I'm not sure if they can hold this spot, especially without Cam Scatterboo, without better play or elevated play, I should say, from Sam Levitt.
Yeah, I mean, that's a really good point. I do like their schedule when you look at who they have to play, though. I mean, they have to go to Waco to take on Baylor. I know that's always a tough time. And then they got Texas Tech as well. But other than that, the TCU, there's the question marks about what's going on there. I think they're like the biggest school where I don't know how to really evaluate TCU at the moment. Out of all the teams in the Big 12, that's the one where I'm like, who are they this year? Houston, when it comes to West Virginia, Colorado, you would think they're all going to be towards the bottom. At least we saw in our rankings as well. And then, of course, they finished the season against their in-state rivals in Arizona, and we all know what we think about them as they are predicted to be 16th in this poll. So even if they have the same type of season, as long as they stay healthy, I think they can find a way to navigate through their Big 12 conference schedule and find themselves maybe potentially back in Arlington. So when I look at the returning talent, when I look at their schedule, it was I don't want to say a no-brainer, but I felt like it was maybe calling it a safe bet to put them at the top after what we saw from them last year. As much as I'd like to have Kansas State as my number one pick, I do think we see Kansas State back in Arlington. I just don't think that doesn't mean that they have to be the number one team. There's 2 teams that go to Arlington, and I do think Kansas State winds up there once it's all said and done.
Absolutely. Let's get back to the poll here. Coming in at number 2 is your Kansas State Wildcats. Quite honestly, Christian, I would have put Kansas State at 1 before I put Arizona State at 1. That is just me. But talk to me about the dynamic, the makeup of this Kansas State team. 2 is, if you're voted to finish second in the Big 12, I would say that the expectation has to be college football playoff on the Wildcats this year.
I completely agree. And I think the mission is to get back to Arlington to fight for Dr. Pepper. I think that is the true mission. But I think the expectation from the nation as a whole is that 2 teams from the Big 12 should be fighting for the 12 college football playoff teams. And if Kansas State's set to finish 2, then they should be that second team involved, assuming that they can't win the Big 12 championship. Maybe they just come in as an at-large bid. Look, 2 8-4 seasons this last couple of years. That's been a rough go for Chris Klieman and the rest of his staff. It's obviously dropping below expectations. They started the season 7-1 last year until the wheels fell off against Houston. But when I look at this Kansas State team, I do think that they're going to get back to the Big 12 championship. I do think that they can get back there for the first time since 2022. I do think Avery Johnson is going to take a huge step forward in this second year as the starting quarterback for Kansas State. They returned a lot. Retention was the main theme of the offseason, Mike, and that was huge, something that they didn't expect really to happen, at least in my point of view, after having that disappointing finish. They wound up bringing back their top wide receiver in Jace Brown. They brought back their new RB1 in Dylan Edwards, who is absolutely dynamic. And then they had some huge wins in the transfer portal. So I think there's a lot of great things to be excited about for Kansas State. Their schedule is obviously super tough. And I think their schedule is a lot harder than what Arizona State's looks like. I mean, for the record, you have to start off against Iowa State in Dublin, week 0. They start off the entire college football season against a conference opponent. And one of your non-conference opponents is a Big 12 opponent in Arizona, although we think they're going to be towards the bottom. So I think it's overall a tough schedule for Kansas State. I don't like some of their late road games as well. But if they can find a way to get maybe, 9-3, 10-2, I think that gets them to Arlington, at least in this tough Big 12 conference.
I agree. Let's get back to our poll here. Texas Tech obviously spent a ton of money in the portal, depending on which reports you believe. Upwards of $30 million potentially was spent bringing in one of the best portal classes we've seen in today's portal. And then you've got a tough Baylor team at 4 that I expect will be contending for one of those playoff spots as well, too. They've got dynamic quarterback play with Sawyer Robertson. He can really sling it around. I expect them to be formidable offensively. But let's jump on down here to the UCF Knights at 15. Expectations rock bottom for the UCF Knights. It's Scott Frost, first year back in Orlando. He said a few days ago that nobody has stood out at quarterback just yet. They've got a three-headed race there between Ja'Cory Brown, Taven Jackson, and the transfer Cam Fancher. This is I get these expectations, but I think that this team is going to be better than 15th in the league they when you go back and you look at some of the games that they lost last year just because they couldn't move the ball through the air. If any one of the three quarterbacks that they pick, whoever wins the job, if they're just a little better throwing the ball, I think that UCF will make a bowl game. I don't think 6-6 is out of the question.
I don't think 6-6 is out of the question either. And I actually had UCF a little bit higher in my poll that we sent into them. They were not 15th. I want to say they were around the 10 or 12 mark, if I remember correctly. I don't have my poll right in front of me, but in the eyes of what I think that UCF can do, when I look at their schedule, when I look at what they are bringing into the table and what Scott Frost has done in the past with that program, obviously it's years past. It's a different type of roster. I understand that. But knowing what he has done in the past, I think that still has some type of pull. The quarterback situation obviously concerns me. I think he would just not be it would just be a bad idea to not say it would concern you, knowing that you have three quarterbacks without a potential of who's going to be that one before you head into fall camp. Hopefully that gets solved a lot sooner than, getting ready for your first game. But I think it is definitely doable for you to be getting 3 to 5 wins inside the Big 12 conference. And I think that alone gets you towards at least the top 10 in the conference. I mean, if you look at, for example, what Kansas did, the Jayhawks last season, they finished the season 4-5 when it came to the standings last year, and they were right in the middle of the pack. So I think that's something that UCF can do. If I'm just trying to be like realistic to standards in Scott Frost's first year, with all this turnover, with all these newcomers, with the fact of the quarterback situation being out of the reach. And to me, that screams 5-7, 6-6, maybe even potentially 7-5, depending on how you do in non-conference. And I think that UCF is definitely right in that bubble.
Yeah, I agree with you. Look, man, it's you're building. This is a rebuild for Scott Frost and UCF. So you've got to start somewhere. Fans have to be able to stomach some ups and downs here in year one. And this ranking certainly reflects maybe more downs than up in year one for Scott Frost and the UCF Knights. We've talked about where the teams rank, but where do the coaches rank coming into this season? We'll talk about that for the UCF Knights and the Kansas State Wildcats right here after a word from our sponsors. This episode of Locked On UCF is brought to you by our friends at Game Time, guys. Download the Game Time app today and get in the game. If you've ever decided at the last minute to head to a ball game with friends or family, maybe it's a game day and you suddenly realize you want to be in the stands, that's exactly where Game Time comes in. It's the easiest way to grab last-minute tickets without the stress. With the money you save on tickets, you can splurge on food, drinks, merch, and even invite a bigger group to come with you. Game Time makes it all possible. Game Time makes buying tickets fast and simple. Prices on the app actually drop closer you get to first pitch or tip-off or wherever you're going. And they've also got incredible last-minute deals, clear seat views, and the lowest price guarantee that takes the worry out of buying. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Game Time. Download the Game Time app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDONCollege for $20 off. Guys, what time is it? Game time. Christian, let's talk about where these coaches rank. Kansas State and Scott Frost. Scott Frost is, I think, like a lot of people agree he's a good fit for UCF coming back to Orlando. But there's some really good coaching in the Big 12 this year. In my opinion, he's a middle of the pack coach. So while the UCF Knights are ranked near the bottom of the conference in terms of expectations, I don't think Scott Frost is a bottom of the conference coach. I've actually got him ranked around 11 or 12 in my coaching rankings right now. Talk to me about Kansas State, man. Where do you have your guy ranked here going into the season in terms of Big 12 coaches?
Yeah, I would say you could probably make an argument for having Chris Klieman anywhere in the top 4. I really do think Chris Klieman deserves to be towards the very top. What he's done ever since taking over for Bill Snyder, I do really think he's done a great job for that and continued on this, this trajectory that he's doing at Kansas State. Now, obviously, the last couple seasons of going 8-4 or 9-4, however you want to do when you're talking about the bowl games, not many teams are able to say that they've won 9 games, this many seasons in a row. Kansas State's been able to do that, although we feel in Manhattan that this is below standards. So I think Chris Klieman's a heck of a coach. I don't know if I'd put him number 1, although I really enjoy what he's doing. One thing that I would probably do, and this is, my fans might not even like this, and I have this conversation with my good friend Nick Maravitz over at Locked On Cyclones every Friday, but I might have to give the nod to Coach Campbell of Iowa State. I think what he's done has been a really good. What he's done with the program has been fantastic. Getting them to their first 10 wins in program history last year, getting them to Arlington. Hopefully, we can outcoach them in Dublin week 0. But I really like what Iowa State was. So if I had to say who's number 1, I'm going to go there, and then I'm going to go ahead and give Chris Klieman number 2. I know my fans aren't going to like that, but hey, they know I'm very transparent with my conversations. Mm-hmm. I'm going to go Kenny Dillingham 3. I think he deserves to be a little bit up there. And then I'm going to change it up a little bit here. Go Sataki with 4. I really like what BYU does at 4. Okay. And at 5, you got to give Whittingham from Utah. He's still got it.
Oh, Christian, where do you have Deion Sanders ranked in the conference?
He's up there. I'd say probably like 6 or 7, right? But there's just not enough room yet. Like, yes, Deion Sanders is a heck of a football player, but what he did for coaching is fantastic as well. We did at Jackson State is great as well. But this is a year that's really going to prove his coaching, right? He no longer has a 2-way Heisman player on his team. He no longer has his son as the head the quarterback. This is the first time as a college coach, he's not going to have his son as a quarterback. So if he can prove me wrong this year, then I would more than happily move him up the rankings. But there's just so many good coaches. Like, I didn't even bring up Mike Gundy, who's had an amazing career at Oklahoma State. I think he's been there since 2005. It's insane what he's done. I haven't even brought up Lance Leipold, but he's done at Kansas. Baylor. Dave Aranda. There's been times where he's been on the hot seat, but he's found a way to get out of it. There's just a lot of really good coaching in the Big 12, and I'm not afraid to say I don't think Deion's deserved that top 5 ranking yet.
You talked about the players that he's losing, but at what point does he get credit for actually bringing those players in and developing them, right? Like, he brought those guys in.
Yeah, that's absolutely a fair point, and I would listen to that argument all day. It's just, I want to see him do it without just one time with a new quarterback, because I think we can both agree that the most important position on the football field is quarterback. And what Shedeur has done was really impressive. And he was ousted at the draft, and that's a whole different story. And of course, I don't like that story whatsoever. But if I'm going to go ahead and pick the best coaches in the Big 12 right now, I know there's at least 5, in my opinion, ahead of Deion Sanders.
Yeah, the question about whether he can reload is a fair one, certainly. But like I said, I don't want to take away the credit for the team that he built that garnered all the hype. Because look, man, at the end of the day, he came in and he essentially showed a lot of guys the door. They brought him upwards of like 50 players or something crazy. Yeah.
Oh, that's a fair argument for sure.
Yeah. So it was a team in his mold in year 1 where they had a ton of attrition from the previous year. And he definitely had to remake it. So, whatever he inherited, there wasn't a lot of production that came over from the previous year. He brought all that production in. Fascinating conversation about whenever you start talking coaching rankings, it gets weirdly personal. But I agree with you. I think there's a lot of quality coaching in the conference this coming year.
100%. Yeah, I would say there's maybe 1, potentially 2 coaches on the hot seat this year. And I think Brett Brennan is one of them from Arizona. I think that's a given about being on the hot seat. And then you have to ask the question, I think you could put the question up about maybe Cincinnati, maybe being on the hot seat. Or, again, going back to what I said in the original statement, I have no idea how to judge this team yet. But what about Sonny Dykes? After starting his first season with TCU, got to the national championship. What have you done for me lately, crowd? So keep in mind.
Yeah, look, man, it is definitely a what have you done for me lately business. You're only as good as the last thing you did, good thing you did in college football. So certainly he's going to have to produce. You need players, you need coaching. Or what will all that culminate to in 2025 for Kansas State and UCF? We'll talk about that next on a Locked On Crossover. Time to make predictions before we get out of here. As I mentioned, the UCF should be a bowl. I think it should be a bowl team this year, quite honestly. I think that there are other teams in the conference with just as many questions as UCF going into Scott Frost's first year. And when you look at the schedule, I'm telling you, there were some wins that they definitely left on the table. I would argue that Arizona State was one of them, where they had Arizona State beat and blew it, right? Cam Scatterboo did not play in that game, but certainly with the talent they had, they were in it. And they, Scott Frost has got to coach his way to some wins. He's got to out-coach his talent levels for a couple of games here, and UCF definitely gets to a bowl game in year one. I'm going to shock the world for UCF, and I'm going 7-5 in year one. I think they steal a couple. I'll be really interested to watch that early season matchup with North Carolina to see if Scott Frost can steal one that nobody expects him to win, but the eyes of the world will be on his program when Bill Belichick comes to town, and it's going to be a lot of fun to watch. So 7-5 for the UCF Knights, man. I'm on record right now, 7-5.
Well, let me be the storm cloud just for a minute and kind of put it in perspective of why potentially that might not happen. Last year, the Big 12 only had 9 teams that were bowl eligible. Now, a couple of those teams that finished 5-7 didn't have a great conference record. So let's just go out and say that we might get 10 teams, maybe 11 at most, in the Big 12 that go to a bowl. That's over half. Of course, 10 teams out of 16, that's a good thing for a conference, especially in a conference that's more parity than everybody else in college football. There is no deeper conference in college football than the Big 12. So can you be one of those 10 teams that make it to a bowl game, UCF? I think you can. And although you're saying 7-5, I think that there's the potential for it. I want to say 5-7. I think that's like he just misses because – look, it's going to be a really tough go in your first year, especially if you don't know the quarterback situation. But Scott Frost is a great coach, so I think he can get it done. I'm going to go 6-6. I think he can make it happen.
Yeah, 6-6 is not a bad prediction here with this schedule. You open up with Jackson State and North Carolina A&T. Should be 2-0. Again, if they can steal one in North Carolina against North Carolina, you've got Kansas State on the other side of that, which right now, if we're being honest, that's probably an L. You saw where we ranked Cincinnati in the preseason Big 12 poll. I think that's a game they can get. So that's potentially win number 3 or 4. And then you've got to find two more to get to a bowl game after that. You've never lost a space game. BYU will be Jake Retzlaff-less. It's going to be a rough go. West Virginia is a game. Rich Rod returns to West Virginia, but certainly they've got a bunch of question marks there. If you got your program in better shape by midseason, that could be a game that UCF steals. So there are some opportunities on this schedule, I think, for them to go to make a bowl game. But yeah, 6-6. Yeah, I can live with that. Let's talk about Kansas State before we get out of here, man. Give me a prediction. They were voted second in our preseason poll, in our Locked On Big 12 preseason poll. I think, honestly, I had them 1 when I voted. I voted Kansas State 1. Talk to me about the Wildcats, man. What's your prediction on the season? I think the precedent has been set. You need 10 wins to get into this playoff.
Yes.
So less than 10 wins, you're not in. And we saw this play out in the SEC with, a premier college football program in Alabama. They won 9, they got left out. Ole Miss won 9, they got left out. Missouri won 9. They got left out. South Carolina, probably the hottest team in America headed into bowl season. Last year, they won 9. They got left out, right? So Heather Dinich from ESPN, she comes on another show I do quite often. She said that the SEC had a chance to get 5 teams into the playoff. And while they only got 3, the opportunity was there, and the other 3 teams blew it. They had a chance, blew it. So if you're Kansas State, you cannot come up short of 10 wins and make this playoff. I've got the Wildcats coming up just short at 9-3.
Well, that's my floor for them is 9-3, and I think the only way that they can still find a way to make it to the playoffs is if 9-3 is enough to get to the Big 12 championship game and win, and that's obviously a really important thing to happen. Obviously, you make that automatic bid. But I'm with you. My prediction is 10-2 for Kansas State this year. Both losses inside the conference. If I had to go ahead and predict those losses, I think they lose to Baylor and Waco. Never liked that. Every time I stare at that one, I'm like, that's the one that really just gets me. And then I don't like the 2 away games back-to-back against Utah and Oklahoma State. Those are 2 teams that did not have a great year last year. In the Big 12 conference, I think we all know that normally doesn't happen twice. You normally don't get that out of especially programs like Whittingham and Gundy, who had a down year last year. I don't like how both of those are away. So my predictions are they go 10-2, they lose to Baylor and they lose to Utah, but they still find themselves in Arlington and they still find themselves in the college football playoffs. But the ceiling, they can. I think this is a team that can go 12-0. I mean, they can find a way to beat Baylor. Obviously, the Iowa State game is really hard. If Avery Johnson does what I think Avery Johnson can do, if he takes that step forward that everybody's expecting him to do with these new wide receivers, with all these weapons he has around him, with this offensive line that's really been reloaded in the transfer portal, this offense is just humming with Matt Wells as the offensive coordinator. Not only do I think that they could be 12-0, I'm not obviously going to predict that. That would just be asinine of me. But I think Avery Johnson could be a dark horse candidate for the Heisman Trophy.
Oh, dark horse for the Heisman Trophy. That's high praise there. A Big 12 Heisman winner would be dope. Could they come out of Manhattan this year? All eyes will be on them for sure. Christian, great conversation. I want to thank you for joining me as always. Before we get out of here, tell people where they can find you.
Of course, Locked On Kansas State, anywhere you listen to your podcasts, audio, YouTube, you name it. Just hit 1,000 subscribers, and this will be our first college football season that we actually get to cover on the channel. We started right after bowl season last year, so really excited for that. Have a great group of everydayers. So come join the adventure. And of course, you can find us on Twitter, X, at Locked On K-State.
Congratulations on 1,000 subscribers, guys. Let's not stop at 1,000 for Locked On Kansas State. Let's push them to 2,000 very, very quickly here. Help push us. We're just short of 1,000, so help push us to 1,000.
Almost there.
I want to thank everybody for joining us today on Locked On UCF, Locked On State, a Locked On crossover. Thank you so much for making us your first listen of every day. For your next listen, go check out our friends at The Portal Show. Our guy, Brian Smith, has the latest in rumors, signings, and portal entries. Be the most informed fan in college football by watching The Portal. You can find them on YouTube or wherever you listen to your podcast. And you can find us here tomorrow on Locked On UCF, Locked On Kansas State. It's a Locked On crossover.